Chaos will always find you. Whether in combat or in life, you can't wait for calm to act. Leaders impose control by enforcing the basics. Discipline is your weapon against disorder.
I'm the old man.
And I'm Lost LT 1775, an infantry officer and captain in the Marine Corps. Welcome to Lost LT's Razor, where the fight, the leader, and the lessons learned all matter. It's the year 2032. You're deployed with your platoon in the Baltics. You've just been ambushed by drones, your radios are jammed, and you hear civilians screaming in the distance, and your Marines are scattering. There's chaos all around you. What basic fundamentals and principles are you going to fall back on as a leader in this scenario?
This episode of Lost LT's Razor is presented by No Greater Sacrifice. Established in 2008 during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, No Greater Sacrifice, NGS, provides college scholarships to the children of the fallen and severely wounded. With an astounding 95 cents of every dollar donated going to the children of our fallen and wounded, NGS has already provided $25 million in scholarships. This year alone, NGS scholars are attending 135 colleges, universities, and schools of higher learning. But NGS is different. They don't just award a scholarship and say, hey, good luck, kid, hope it works out. No, NGS is built on the mentorship with accountability model. That means frequent touch points and guidance each step of the academic journey. Check out nogreatersacrifice.org. Our heroes left their footprints on faraway battlefields. We can leave our fingerprints on their children. nogreatersacrifice.org. Lost LT, today we're going to be talking about chaos and control. I mean, we're all surrounded by chaos every now and then. Chaos happens, obviously, on the battlefield. What are you talking about with chaos and control?
Chaos and control is this interesting dichotomy, and it's something that I think is a term that we throw around a lot, but when we actually break down the words, I think it's super important for leaders to understand the difference between the two of them and how we can use them in our, not in just our daily lives, but also in combat. So I would start off with defining war we know as a clash of wills. It's something that's made up by a combination of uncertainty and friction. There's also chaos in our civilian life, things that we've talked about before. Everything from car crashes, we've got health scares in the family, to the volatility of the stock market and financial shocks. I mean, there's chaos presents itself in a dozen forms, and it's on us to take a look at the external things that are influencing us and try to use some discipline and use some internal motivation or whatever the case is to start to create some control.
Last episode, we were talking about fear. So I'm guessing fear is what could happen. Chaos is what is happening.
Control is, I think, at its core. Before we talk about what it is, let's talk about what it's not. And I think control is not micromanaging. Oftentimes, leaders think when we want to control something, it has to be our way. It has to be done exactly by prescriptive steps that we've placed forth. And if it's not happening the way that you want it to happen, then it's not correct. And I think that's a common misconception and honestly a large fault of what a lot of leaders tend to do, because that micromanaging is the number one, I'd say, way to lose some of the trust and confidence from your subordinates. So we absolutely do not want to micromanage. Some examples of control, I think, in a military setting. This is something as simple as you're doing patrol-based operations in the tree line. You've got security set. Your priorities of work are being conducted. You've got a clear path, and there's a troop to task matrix that's built, and everyone's off doing what they need to do. Whereas in a civilian context, this is a parent sticking to routines. This is your boss at work. You have a series of checklists that are required. And it's just, I'd say getting into a routine. Routine and habits are probably two of the biggest ways to create control.
Lost LT, in a military mindset, do you function from a starting point that you think you can control outcomes, or are you controlling the process to get to the best outcome possible?
Well, I think there's probably somewhat of a balance of both. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this too, because generally speaking, I want to start from what the end state looks like and then back plan, reverse engineer the steps, those kind of stepping stones along the way. So I think if you start with what it should look like at the end, it's a lot easier to control the process as it's occurring.
Well, it reminds me of that famous quote, and I'm going to butcher it, but Mike Tyson says everybody's got a great plan until you get punched in the mouth.
Getting punched in the mouth sucks. So yeah, I think Mike Tyson said it best there for sure. Chaos versus control. We know we experience chaos. We know that good leaders are probably better than bad leaders at implementing control into the processes that are occurring. So whether you use the Mike Tyson saying of getting punched in the mouth or the Marine Corps saying or military saying of we know no plan survives first contact, it's the same thing and the same application there. But I do think that step number one is identify the end state. In the Marine Corps, again, we use in commander's intent, the end state is with respect to the terrain, the enemy, and friendlies. So you have to list those three things. So the commander is tasked to define, what do I want the terrain to look like? What does success look like with respect to the enemy? And then what does it look like with the friendlies? And so by providing those, that just comes back to commander's intent, is something that commanders are supposed to provide, clear and concise commander's intent. So I think defining the end state through that lens then lets you, make those rudder corrections a lot easier.
So when you're talking about moving from chaos to control, and we've talked about that process, what role does discipline play when you're training Marines? When you're in, 99% of your career will be training, will it not?
At least in a peacetime military, I think I'd say yes. The large majority is obviously conducted in training, and we train for the purpose of being ready to deploy with combat in mind as the priority. So I mean that's what we're training to. Those are the standards that are being set forth. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of unknowns and uncertainties. I mean, you see deployments in the past. I think I'm going on a UDP to Japan, and all of a sudden that unit ends up in Afghanistan. Or you go on a Marine Expeditionary Unit. 1st Battalion, 8th Marines a few years ago, they deployed on the 24th MEU and then found themselves in Afghanistan in 2021 for the withdrawal, not planning on being there. We know that you're not going to rise to the occasion. You're going to fall back to the level of your training. And I think discipline decides the quality of that level of training.
So you're an 18-year-old from Muleshoe, Texas. You raised your hand, you took the oath. You're a little bit rough around the edges, but you are now in the United States Marine Corps. Perhaps you go off to Parris Island, wherever you go, and then all of a sudden you're put into the fleet. How do you take this rough young teenager and instill the military traditions, specifically the Marine Corps traditions of discipline in this youngster, man or woman?
The first thing that came to mind when you started saying that is a quote that the Commandant of the Marine Corps, he was on he was speaking, I think this is probably about a little over a year ago now, but was speaking to a large group of individuals and brought up the idea of the uniform regulations. And he's wearing service alphas at the time, which is that green dress coat uniform. And, one of the questions he poses to the crowd is, does anyone know why our ribbons are 1/8 of an inch above the lapel or the piece of the jacket? And everyone kind of looks around to each other and doesn't really know why. And he's like, well, because we made it up, because there has to be a standard, and someone sometime decided this is the expectation and this is the standard, and we're going to hold you to it. Because if we can't hold you to the simple things, how can we expect you to execute with commander's intent? How can we expect you to look out for your buddies to the left and right of you? How can we expect you to operate decentralized when there are lives on the line if I can't trust you to keep your ribbon centered in 1/8 of an inch? And so, something as simple as that. Discipline starts at the foundational entry-level schools in the Marine Corps, whether you're officer and enlisted. But the second that you earn your Eagle, Globe, and Anchor, you are a leader. You are expected to be the bridge between chaos and control with the discipline that we've instilled in you since day one.
I love it. So the 1/8 of an inch, we just made it up. It sounds like parenting. When I raised my children, one of my favorite lines was, just because I just made it up, and that's what we're going to do.
Yep.
So I can appreciate that. Lost LT, what happens if a Marine loses discipline in the middle of chaos?
I think this ties into probably one of the last conversations we had the other day about, when fear hits and there's paralysis, I'd say a similar thing occurs in discipline and chaos. Your unit is likely going to freeze and you're going to miss steps. And that missteps results in things like fratricide. That blue on blue where we have unintended consequences because of our actions. That's what we absolutely need to avoid. And that comes back on the leader. You kind of alluded to some family examples as well, but I think to make it more relevant for everyone too, you get a paycheck on the 1st and 15th if you're in the military. Generally speaking, we get super comfortable on those 2 days. But what happens when you've spent your paycheck within the first 2 or 3 days of the pay period, and now you're frantic for the next 12, 13 days before you get paid? I don't know. Small example. You can also make bad decisions in the workplace that have unintended second and third order effects. So I think just in general, a lack of discipline to what we know we should be doing results in chaos. And so we just, at the individual you and me level, we need to identify those things and maybe look at some of the habits that we have. We define character as the consequence of your habit. If we know that character is the consequence of your habit, where are some potential areas in your character that maybe you're a little bit weaker here, or here's an area that you need to focus on, so you can identify your strengths and weaknesses, and then just maybe use a friend, phone a friend, or whatever to get some more discipline in an area that you need it, so that it doesn't result in spiraling into chaos.
Yeah, a few minutes ago you mentioned, I think the 1/8 that was not expecting to be deployed to Afghanistan, where we made a very abrupt withdrawal. They face a little chaos there. They face control issues. What happened? As I recall, we lost 13 Marines.
We lost 13 service members, yeah. There was 11 Marines, 1 soldier, and 1 sailor. We just passed the 4-year anniversary of withdrawing from Afghanistan. And I mentioned it before, but my first unit that I showed up to the fleet was 1/8. I was not there for HCI. I checked into the unit about a week and a half after the main body got home. So as a young officer, stepping into a platoon that had just been through, you talk about chaos, had just been through an incredibly chaotic few weeks, done an incredible job with the conditions they were thrown into. But still absolutely, like when you start talking chaos and control, situation like that quickly spirals out of control, which we saw.
I remember the news reports during that time frame with regular Afghans lining up at the checkpoints, trying to get out as fast as they can. And there was just crazy chaos there. You had some of those Marines come back to you. What were they dealing with after they got home?
I don't want to put words in their mouth, but from my perception as, the young officer that checked in and was trying to figure out. I mean, I checked into the fleet, fired up, ready to go to the field and train, and I just had to understand that the Marines that I just got off of one hell of a deployment and just needed to come home and take a deep breath, take some time off, recoup, rest and refit a little bit, and then they were open to having a conversation. So, I mean, it just took a slight, I guess, I just had to understand the bigger picture situation in there. So, I mean, what it quickly turned into after a few days and weeks was me just pulling in the sergeants that are, some of the more senior NCOs, and just asking questions. We would have individual conversations. We'd have smaller group setting conversations. And then we were able to use that a few weeks or months into me getting there. We started getting some new Marines. The next workup was beginning, et cetera. And I used them and to really just start to open up some of the door to these conversations about what are the human factors of combat. What did you experience? Tell us, everything and anything that you remember. Because it was as much learning for me as it was maybe therapy, hopefully, for them, as well as setting up the next generation for some tools, some keys to success. And so that's kind of how I used it. I don't want to put words in their mouth on some of the things, but I tell you what, some of the stories, now having that first, point of view story from them after the fact, just adds to the fire, and also makes me that much more proud of all the individuals and the teams that were over there. It's just insane. Incredible what they were able to accomplish under the conditions that they were given.
Yeah, I mean, LT, as you describe that, it sounds like you come home from chaos like that, 13 service members lost. Your spirit has got to be rattled. There's no question about that, no matter how much training and discipline you have. You come home rattled. Can you find some control to that internal chaos after the fact?
I think you can find control after chaos, but it comes back to, I think this comes back to, again, I've said it a million times, but your exposure, using human factors again. I mean, human factors, we talk about, these are the things that humans experience, whether emotion, exhaustion, it's the things that your body is exposed to after, whether it's trauma. I think trauma is probably one of the more common factors. But so, I mean, the more that you're exposed to the psychology, I think the better that you can react to it after you are in a position to be able to identify.
So what happens when Marines or anybody else loses their discipline in the middle of chaos?
The second you find yourself in a situation where, again, you start to break and cave under pressure, and let chaos take control instead of taking control in chaos, I think that's where everything crumbles. You should never let the situation get there, and it's on the leader to always demonstrate calmness and professionalism in that scenario, because we are a professional warfighting organization, and regardless of the conditions, you can have your own internal thoughts, and I think you should, and that's encouraged. But the second you about face and look at your Marines, or your Marines are looking at you, you tuck those emotions away and you present yourself calm and collected, because that is what's expected of you as a leader, but that is what's going to stop the unit from spiraling out of control as well.
Talk to me about the difference between mindset and training. So, for example, when you look at first responders, I mean, they dash into burning buildings. The police officers draw their weapon and go in with an active shooter. Some of that is their training, certainly, and some of that is just their natural mindset. If there's some kind of a chaos taking place in a social setting, some people run, some people run towards. What's the difference between the mindset and the training?
That is a great question. I think mindset is everything. Your ability, I mean, I sit, again, we've said this before, I don't have I don't have combat experience, but I tell you what, this every time I go in public, I'm still waiting for an active shooter or some type of psychopath to enter the room, and I'm always going to position myself. I mean, I was sitting in church the other day, and we all have these intrusive thoughts of the what if scenarios. I don't care about what other people are thinking around me in those situations, because I know in the back of my head, I'm keeping an eye on the door. That's just me, and I don't know if I could necessarily put a finger on it. Maybe I'm just a paranoid individual sometimes, but I'm never going to put myself in a situation where I'm caught flat-footed, because maybe I'm a pessimist, maybe I don't know what you want to call it, but I'm never going to let myself get flat-footed, and I think that same mindset applies. Mindset is everything, and so before you can talk effectively about chaos and control and start to build a path, you have to have a proper mindset for the conditions to be set for you to even be able to establish some of those habits. I think to the second part of your question, when you start talking training, we know it starts with mindset. That's already been explained. But before you can develop training, or before you can develop effective training, you need to again look at what are the most probable risks that you're going to assume, or where do you think you're going to hit the hardest, get hit the hardest, and then I think you start to develop training that is as hard as you can possibly make it. But what does that actually look like? I want the emotions brought out in training. We talk about high fidelity training. High fidelity training it's got an emotional response or attachment to it. So, for example, go hike 10 or 12 miles with 100 pounds on your back, and then start doing gun drills for an hour, disassembling and assembling your machine gun. I've now made you exhausted, and I've made you proficient in an individual skill that you might need to do in combat under fire. So if you can replicate the tough, heinous conditions that you might be expected to operate in, and I force you repetition over and over and over again, then if and when you find yourself in that situation, then boom, you don't even have to worry. You don't think. It is a subconscious reaction to the conditions that are around you, because you've hammered this battle drill home. We talked battle drill the other day of it being defined as a predetermined response to a common battlefield occurrence. So predetermined response, I know that I have to do X, Y, and Z as soon as this happens. So if I get hit with an ambush, I'm going to turn and I'm going to fight through and go kill the enemy. I mean, there's a reaction to indirect fire. Depending on the direction that it's at, I'm going to provide a quick response to my team, tell them the direction and distance to move, or take cover, depending. So enter any immediate action drill or any battle drill, and we're going to start making you as tired as possible. Maybe insert. I think the Rangers do this well. You get a little bit hunger, get some hunger and thirst in your body as well as and then make tough decisions. So little tangent there, but I think very relevant when you start looking at how can I actually develop training that checks some of these marks.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're talking about mindset. I'd interject the word love as well. I presume that when you're training shoulder to shoulder, you've got your men and women that are part of your unit. There is a love and a deep respect that kind of permeates that unit. It's almost like a parent that sees a child in the water struggling, and that parent just takes off regardless of what they're wearing to make sure that child is safe. Is love even a component?
We would probably just summarize it up as the idea of caring for your Marines. What does it mean to love your Marines? I think if you asked the average Marine Corps general officer, they would probably tell you, love your Marines, don't fall in love with your Marines. I think that there is a fine line there, and especially for the junior leader to understand. Love your Marines, take care of them, treat them as if they were a family member, but don't do actions to make them fall in love with you or because you have fallen in love with them. I cannot emphasize this enough to the junior officer, but you have a role to fulfill in the platoon. They don't need you as a friend, and they don't frankly want you as a friend. You are expected to be the discipline and be the individual that provides them with clarity and intent, and then gets out of their way and lets them execute. You cannot afford to go beyond what is allowed when it comes to loving your Marines. You need to be, and it's tough. I mean, it's easier said than done, because every senior officer will also tell you that they have some regrets, and they got way too close to their Marines sometimes. So I don't know. It's a slippery slope, but I think if I could hammer that home to the junior officer, love your Marines, but don't fall in love with your Marines.
I mean, that makes sense. You've got to, obviously, all of us in all aspects of life, we want to be liked. We do want to be accepted. We want to be liked. We want to be loved. Yep. But if you're leading your Marines into battle, they also need to first and foremost look at you and the NCOs as their leaders, as the ones that are dictating, as you say, commander's intent, for sure. So as we get close to wrapping up, how does discipline in the civilian sector, Main Street America, how does discipline help everyday people impose control over chaos?
One of the most common ways that this is applicable to civilians would be, I think, something as simple as a budget. We all wish we had more money. The more that the water rises, the boat rises. I think that's the saying. So, I mean, this idea of having a budget based on the pay periods that you get, how are you going to keep yourself to a standard and follow a certain routine on the budget? When are you going to make more money? How are you going to be able to save more money? I think the budget is one that could also be exercised. We talked about this the other day. If you set expectations and you know the end state, you have a goal in mind, then you can develop a routine. But I think it comes down to two things. It is your ability to develop habits and routines, and then put those into action. And so whether you are capable as an individual to hold yourself to that standard, or you need to ask a buddy or ask your spouse or whatever, I think that's where it comes into play. Is we have to develop habits, and then again, we know character is a consequence of those habits, good or bad.
Rising tide raises all ships. Isn't that the truth? Lost LT, as we close, what would you ask of your audience members? What should they contemplate and take this forward?
I would just ask, and I mean, this is a great question to always ask after, as kind of a debrief to something, is when is the last time that you've found that chaos has truly blindsided you? What did that feel like? How did that affect you? And have you done anything different to make sure that doesn't happen again? A second one for Marines would be, what SOPs have you identified that have held your unit together? We talk about a no comm plan. If comm is down and radios fail, do our leaders fail as well, or do we have other SOPs in place to make sure that we prevail? Sort of a what's next? What do I do with this information? I think that at least one thing for myself is I know chaos is guaranteed. I think chaos is the standard and it is expected. The question for you is, do you let it consume you? Do you let it control you? Or do you impose control through discipline?
You got that right. Chaos is coming. It may not be today. It may not be tomorrow, but it's coming. Folks, you've been listening to Lost LT's Razor with Lost LT and the Old Man. Join us again next week for another episode on wherever you get your podcasts. Lost LT fires a new podcast episode downrange every Tuesday. Make sure to follow the Lost LT's Razor on Spotify and Instagram so you get the weekly reminders. Oh, and there's more. Check out lostlt1775.com for for everything from cool merch to humping a ruck full of resources designed to chart your nav to the profession of arms. So until next time, Semper Fi.
All right.